The Detroit Lions kick off their first preseason game of the 2024 season tomorrow night. They go to New York, they take on the New York Giants, and despite the starters likely not having a large impact in this game, there are still going to be a lot of young players, a lot of young stars, and a lot of really intriguing players to keep your eyes on as the game progresses and as we get to see this preseason unfold. And today, we're going to take a look at the projected starting offense for the Detroit Lions in week one, take a look at what players to keep an eye on as they play the New York Giants and as this game progresses, and really just go over each position player by player and take a look at what players are going to be really exciting to take a look at and what the expectation should be for some of these Detroit Lions young playmakers. So starting off, we'll take a look at the Detroit Lions traveling to New York. They kick off week one of the 2024 preseason on August 8th, that being tomorrow. I believe they kick off at 7 p.m. Now, the starters will likely be out, meaning we won't see Jared Goff, we won't see St. Brown, we won't see Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, the offensive line, the defense, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, or any of the players in that nature, and likely some of the backups as well. I doubt that Brock Wright is going to see a lot of time. I doubt that, a couple of the other veteran players like Khalif Raymond are necessarily going to see a lot of time. There are guys that just know that they're going to be on the roster. The Lions know that they're going to be on the roster, and especially at MetLife Stadium, really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put your starters at risk of injury, knowing that they are going to be impactful in their 2024 regular season. So that leaves a lot of players not able to play, but then that opens the door for a lot of opportunities for the younger players to play. And that is kind of the focus of this video, is we're going to be talking about those young guys. Now, first and foremost, we can't talk about this week one matchup without talking about Hendon Hooker, the Detroit Lions' third-round selection from the 2023 NFL Draft. The former Tennessee Volunteer and Heisman frontrunner is now going to have his first NFL opportunity after tearing his ACL in November of 2022. Now, Hendon Hooker was great in college. Standing at 6'4", 218 pounds, Hendon Hooker threw for over 8,900 passing yards in his collegiate career, with 80 passing touchdowns to just 12 interceptions. He also rushed for over 2,000 rushing yards, as well as 12 touchdowns on the ground. So he was a very good, very dynamic player. And as I said, at the end of that 2022 college football season, he was a front runner for the Heisman Trophy before unfortunately tearing his ACL against South Carolina in late November. That led him to slightly falling in the NFL draft, of course, not playing his rookie season and not being healthy and not really getting any NFL experience up until tomorrow night, where he will officially take his first NFL snaps. Now, Hendon Hooker is an extremely talented player. His arm talent is definitely there. His decisions and his decisiveness definitely need a little bit of work, and he's had an up and down camp. He's made throws that make you drop your jaw, and he's made plays that just wow you as a fan, and then he makes throws and they're interceptions, and you say, well, what are you looking at, right? Why are you holding the ball so long? Why are you staring down wide receivers? And those are things that are going to come with, rookie development. This essentially is going to be Hendon Hooker's rookie season, his first time really with the team, his first time, of course, taking NFL snaps, the first time being that signal caller. So be ready for some mistakes, be ready for an interception or two. And there's a chance that Hendon Hooker might not look like the Hendon Hooker that we saw at Tennessee. He might not air it out as well. He might not have the deep ball. He might not have that chemistry or that connection. And of course, he's not going to be in the same offense that's going to be so impactful for him. So there's a good chance that Hendon Hooker has some up and down plays throughout this first preseason game. Personally, for me, I want to see the flashes. I want to see some big plays down the field. I want to see him stretch the field. I want to see his ability to attack the intermediate and deeper parts of the field, because that was really his strength at Tennessee. I want to potentially see that mobility come back, maybe add that element to the offense as well. Of course, rushing for over 2,000 yards in college. He has had that mobility in the past, but don't expect Hendon Hooker to be perfect. He's going to make some rookie mistakes. He's going to take some sacks. He's going to throw an interception or two. It's going to happen, but I still think it's going to be really exciting to see what number 2 can do for the Detroit Lions and really see if there is anything there to look forward to for the future. Now, taking a look at the running back positions, I'm really excited to see either Sione Vaki or Jamar Jefferson. Now, Sione Vaki, of course, is a fourth-round selection from the 2024 NFL Draft, a player from Utah that transitioned from safety to running back midseason, played really, really well, put up some good statistics. And then Jamar Jefferson is a player that was a seventh-round selection in the first ever draft class of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. And despite not being super impactful throughout the regular season, he always seems to be a player that throughout training camp looks really good, throughout the preseason shows some flashes, but for one reason or another just doesn't end up making this roster. Now, the Detroit Lions, of course, have a great running back duo. They have Jahmyr Gibbs, they have David Montgomery, but I think running back 3 is still very much up in the air. Craig Reynolds took on that role last year as well as in 2022, but with Sione Vaki coming in and I think doing a lot of things maybe better than Craig Reynolds, and of course Jamar Jefferson really pushing for that running back 3 spot as well, I think there will be quite a bit of competition for that. You of course have Donovan Knight competing for that as well as a couple of other depth running backs that have a lesser shot, but I do think the running back 3 competition essentially comes down to Reynolds, Vaki, and Jefferson. We know what Craig Reynolds is, we know what he can do, we know what he can't do. Worst case scenario, he returns as the third running back and the Lions still have a pretty good 3-headed monster. But best case scenario is one of these 2 guys is able to outperform Craig Reynolds, and Sione Vaki is able to be a more dynamic playmaker. He's able to be more impactful in the regular season, and I'm really excited to see how Vaki is used. I'm really excited to see Jamar Jefferson, and Craig Reynolds should get some opportunities as well, but I'm less excited to see him because we know what Craig Reynolds is, whereas we don't really know what Sione Vaki is going to bring or whether or not Jamar Jefferson is truly ready to take that next step. Now, Sione Vaki last year with the Utah Utes played in just a couple of games at running back for Utah, but he had 42 attempts for 317 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, as well as 11 receptions for 203 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. He's been incredibly impactful in both the passing game and the rushing attack at Utah. He was the most efficient running back in college football last year to have over 40 attempts. He was really good, and I'm excited to see what he can do with the Detroit Lions behind a really solid offensive line. And then, again, Jamar Jefferson's had a lot of praise recently, had a really good camp, has some really good tools, I think has really good contact balance for the running back position. So I'm just really excited to see what he can do with this offensive line in this rushing attack as well. Going over to the wide receivers, I think the battle that's going to be very important to watch is going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones versus Antoine Green. I think they're going to be the 2 boundary wide receivers to start this game. And while the Lions' top 4 receivers are pretty much set in stone, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Darius Fountain, as well as Khalif Raymond, the depth is not. There's a lot up in the air for these wide receivers 5 and 6, and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Antoine Green will be fighting for that spot, as well as Isaiah Williams, as well as Jalen Calhoun, as well as Caden Davis, as well as Traquan Smith. There is a lot of competition for this depth wide receiving spot, and I think one of them is going to be cut. I think either Donovan Peoples-Jones or Antoine Green will potentially be released, and while both of them I think are very talented and very deserving of making this roster, I think that the Lions might only want one of this play style or 2 of this play style if you include Darius Fountain. They might not want to keep all 3 guys that have a very similar skill set. Now, starting off with Antoine Green, he was a preseason star last year. 3 games, 8 targets, 7 catches, 151 yards, and a touchdown through the year. He was great, and he played a little bit in the regular season, had 1 reception on a screen pass for 2 yards, played a lot versus the Baltimore Ravens, but did not receive or have a catch. I don't even believe had a target on the day. He was really good. Throughout training camp and throughout OTAs, he was taking wide receiver 3 reps. He looked really good in camp, showed a lot of flashes, but still lacked a little bit of that consistency, right? Antoine Green is a player that 1 rep will make your jaw drop and will, make a wow play that, impresses everybody and looks like a future star. And then the next play, he'll drop a simple screen pass or he'll drop a slant route with nobody covering him. There's just a lot of back and forth with the greatness of Antoine Green and the downfall of Antoine Green. And if he can reel it in and be a little bit more consistently towards the good side of his game, he's going to make the roster. He's going to be really good. But again, it's that consistency and whether or not he can control that. Donovan Peoples-Jones, on the other hand, had a great season in 2022 for the Browns. 61 receptions, 839 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, a true wide receiver too that put up nearly 900 receiving yards as that second option in the offense. But last year with the Lions, wasn't really that good. Last year with the Browns before being traded, really wasn't that utilized. And despite having all of the tools, being 6'2", 210 pounds, running in the low 4.4s and having good ball skills to track it through the air, he just, for one reason or another, never seemed to really put it together with the Browns last year after they added Elijah Moore. And especially after joining the Detroit Lions, I believe had just 5 receptions last year in his final 7 games and didn't even break 100 yards through the air. So going back and forth between the two, they're very similar as far as play style, but Antoine Green has more time with the offense. Antoine Green has more time with Jared Goff, and I think those things are going to be really impactful when it comes down to final roster cuts. Now, with that being said, I think that other guys on this roster have the chance to make it as well. Traquan Smith, of course, has the opportunity. Isaiah Williams has the chance to make this roster, as well as guys like Jalen Calhoun. But I think that it's really going to come down to whether or not Antoine Green and Donovan Peoples-Jones both earn that roster spot, or whether one beats out another and the other one ends up falling out of the roster because of too much of the similar play styles. Now, the last group we're going to talk about today is going to be the offensive line. My projected offensive line is Connor Galvin at left tackle, Coyote Awaska at left guard, Kingsley Egukan as the starting center, Ike Bodeger as the starting right guard, just because the depth there is a little bit lesser, as well as Colby Sorsdale at the right tackle position. Now, Giovanni Manu as well as Christian Mahogany, to my knowledge, are both going to be out. Christian Mahogany has not been available for camp for the last couple of days, and Giovanni Manu, to my knowledge, is still within the NFI list, meaning he cannot play. Now, if he was removed, I have not heard that knowledge. If he does, I think that changes things around a little bit. If Giovanni Manu is able to play, which again, I don't know for a fact, I think he will start at left tackle. I think Awaska and Egukan will still be the same, but I think you will then see Colby Sorsdale start at right guard, with Connor Galvin being moved over to the right tackle position. That, in my opinion, will be a much stronger offensive line. But again, it all really just depends with injuries and kind of what goes on there. This offensive line, I think, has a lot of talent. Connor Galvin, I was a big fan of last preseason. I thought he played really well. I thought he deserved a roster spot and a practice squad position. Coyote Awaska started in the NFC Championship game a season ago for the Detroit Lions. Kingsley Egukan is one of my favorite UDFA players on the offensive side of the ball, and Colby Sorsdale is a player that I thought played really well last season as well at right guard, but also has that versatility now to play the right tackle position. A couple of other guys on that offensive line, I think that Duke Clemens from UCLA will be really interesting to watch, a player that, was really good in college, played center, but got moved over to guard. He might potentially play at that right guard position as well. There's always that possibility as well. But there is a lot of depth on this offensive line. I think there's a lot of talent. And of course, guys like Sewell, Decker, Ragnow, Zeitler, and Glasgow will not play. I don't think Dan Skipper is going to necessarily play. I think he's pretty solidified in that, Khalif Raymond or, Brock Wright-esque role where, he's going to make the roster. He's going to play. He's going to be impactful. No reason to throw him out in the preseason. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how this unit works together. I think they got a lot of good pass blockers. I think Awaska and Egukan are really solid run blockers, as well as Colby Sorsdale. I think it'll be really interesting to see how this line looks with the depth. Of course, they have 6 deep now, but how is that depth going to look from when the regular season hits? If these players have to play, how will they look? And I think it's going to be a really interesting factor in this game to whether or not Hendon Hooker plays well, whether or not the rest of the running backs play very well, whether or not, the wide receivers have the chance to get open and get the ball. I think it all starts and ends with this offensive line. And I think this will be the offensive line to get it done. With all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what players you're most excited to see on the offensive side of the ball, what your expectations are for all of these potential starters tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow we will be back before the game to talk about the defensive side of things, what players to watch, what players to keep an eye on, and what players to expect from. But with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. If you have yet to subscribe, please go down below and do so. It helps the channel out a ton. We just passed 4,100 subscribers, which was the goal, which I really appreciate. So let's push for 4,200 subscribers before the start of kickoff of week 2. I'd be very happy to see that, and that would help the channel out a ton. But with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Of course, let me know down in the comments below your opinions on all of these players and what your expectations are. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.